Okay, we are on the second part of chapter 8. Everyone turned out to see them off. It was a sparkling fresh morning. The jolly boat moved down the Golden River with the professor and the children and the Proc and the Whangdoodle aboard. Clarity stayed behind at the palace in order to rest for her royal christening. The children felt mixed emotions of happiness and sadness. It was good to be going home, but sad to be saying goodbye. They brightened, however, when the professor revealed that the Whangdoodle had extended an invitation to come to visit again another day. As they sailed along, they made good use of the royal soda fountain. Having eaten their fill, the children reflected on all the exciting things they had done and the wonders they had seen. Lindy looked at the mountains and remembered the Gaius Scutus and wondered how she had ever managed to pluck up enough courage to cross the bridge for the professor. Ben saw the Needle Rock and thought how narrowly he had missed being caught by the Splinter Cat. Tom recalled his valiant dash to catch up with the brain strain. Each child concluded that every danger, every challenge had finally been worthwhile. The Whangdoodle was deep in conversation with the professor. "I'm going to tell you a secret," he confided. "The Proc said never to tell anyone, but I want to tell you. When all the other Whangdoodles disappeared so many hundreds of years ago, it was because humanity chose to forget them. The only reason I was able to stay alive in those dreadful times was because I was certain that somebody, somewhere, still believed in me. I thought you might like to know how good it feels to have my faith justified after all these years." The professor was so touched he was unable to reply. The Whangdoodle continued, "I don't suppose you could stay on, could you? I understand about the children having to go, but couldn't you stay?" "I'm afraid not, Your Majesty. There's a lot of work for me to finish." I was just thinking that I could use your advice. I mean, I've never been married before. I hope I'll be able to look after Claire properly. You know, to be a wise husband and everything." "I don't think you'll have any problems, Your Majesty. Just love her very much, as she so obviously loves you, and you'll find the answers. Never fear." The jolly boat pulled into its mooring on the Blandlands plain. The children and the professor said their goodbyes. It was a sad moment. There was a sudden flurry of feathers, and the Whifflebird appeared out of nowhere and flew straight onto Tom's shoulder. She screamed, "Mayday!" right in his ear. "What is it, Whifflebird? What is it?" She made frantic little sounds and hung onto his jacket. The Proc stepped forward and said wisely, "It is because you're leaving. Come along, Whifflebird. Thomas will be back another day." "Of course I will," said Tom bravely. He lifted her off his shoulder and handed her gently to the Proc. "Now, you take good care of yourself, dear Whifflebird. I'll see you soon." He turned away so that she could not see his distress. The professor glanced at the children, then looked at the Whangdoodle. He gave a meaningful nod of farewell. The children suddenly felt the world beginning to spin, and the familiar dazzling light surrounding them. Almost immediately they found themselves back in the professor's garden. The professor said quietly, "You'd better hurry on home. Ethel will be waiting for you." Lindy flung her arms around him. "Oh, Professor, thank you for the best time ever. It was wonderful. Will we see you again soon?" "Yes, I'll be here from time to time, though Washington will be my base." "It's not going to be the same without you," said Ben. "Good heavens, you can't have life handed to you on a platter every day," said the professor. "That would be very boring, and there'd be no satisfaction in it. You shouldn't be needing me at all for a while. You've learned your lessons well. Look around you. Don't you see things differently now?" The children gazed at the garden and the familiar house and the sky above and realized that they were aware of every detail, every color, every texture. It was hard to believe that there had ever been a time when they had not seen the world with the same clarity. The professor put his arms around them and said firmly, "Listen to me. You have all the tools, all the equipment necessary to make your own world as wonderful as Whangdoodle Land. So how about trying? If you set a good enough example, you could start a fashion. Think of the favor you'd be doing the Whangdoodle. He might be persuaded to visit one day. He might just stay around if we all tried hard enough. It's up to each of us, each and every one of us. Now be off with you. I love you, and I'll write you a long letter from Washington." And that is the end. And then the next part is the epilogue. So we'll read that. The epilogue is like this little after the story's over section. It felt good to be home. Mr. and Mrs. Potter returned on Sunday, and Mrs. Potter cooked a delicious evening meal. Mr. Potter said, "Well, how was your vacation? Did you miss us?" "The professor gave us a lovely time, but yes, we did miss you," said Ben. "How's Grandma?" asked Lindy. "She's much better, darling. She knitted you these pretty slippers." Mrs. Potter handed Lindy a pair of pink woolen slippers with floppy tassels on them. Lindy gasped in surprise. "Why, they're almost exactly like the Whangdoodles," she blurted out. "The what?" Mrs. Potter looked puzzled. The telephone rang, and Mr. Potter got up to answer it. Ben nudged Lindy fiercely under the table. He said evenly, "The professor was telling us about a funny creature in olden times that was supposed to grow slippers." "Is that the creature you were looking up in the dictionary a few weeks ago?" "Yes." Ben glanced at Tom. The conversation was getting out of hand. Mrs. Potter began to clear the dishes from the table. "Did you ever find out if it existed or not?" There was a long pause. Ben stammered. "The professor said it was up for us to decide." Fortunately, it ended there because Mr. Potter walked excitedly into the room. "Frida, that was the university on the phone. The most amazing thing has happened. You know all that equipment that was stolen from the laboratory? Well, it's been returned, every single piece." "It must have been a student hoax, dear." "It must have been." Mr. Potter sat down by the fire and opened the Sunday paper. "Fetch my pipe, will you, Tom? Did the professor say anything to you, Ben, about the theft? It was his stuff that was stolen, you know." "No, sir." It's very odd. Here's a photograph of your friend in the paper. I see he's going to Washington as special scientific advisor to the president. Well, let's hope he does some good." "Oh, I'm certain he will, Dad," Ben said with a smile. Mr. Potter frowned. "This work he's doing, this genetics thing, I'm not sure I like the idea. In the final analysis, I wonder if it'll be good for mankind." Ben felt a sudden, tremendous need to communicate with his father. "Well, whether we like it or not, I think genetics is here to stay, Dad, and it could be the answer to a lot of things." He spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully. "We will have a tremendous responsibility on our hands. If we're going to play God, we must try to do it with honor and decency." Edwin Potter stared at his son. Then he said quietly, "Ben, you're growing up. Those are very wise remarks, and you're absolutely right." Ben felt a warm glow of happiness at his father's praise. "I think the professor helped me think it out," he explained. Mrs. Potter took up her knitting. Professor, this and that. That's the only word I ever hear," she admonished gently. "Will you ever stop talking about that man, I wonder?" The children looked at each other. "Oh, I don't think so," they all answered at exactly the same moment. And that is the end of the adventure, the last of the really great Whangdoodles. Hope you liked it. Bye-bye.